it's more important than ever to keep an eye on retirement.
Hi, and welcome into Eye on Retirement, the weekly show that keeps you in the know about all things retirement. I'm your host and financial advisor, Rick Everett, and today we're talking about the retirement fundamentals. Today, the panel of professionals we've gathered for this episode includes Danny Goolsby, financial advisor and founding partner of Market Advisory Group; Joshua Sikora, CPA and tax advisor from Market Tax Services; Alex Robinson, estate planning attorney from Eidelman Law Firm; and Mark Benefiel, health insurance advisor from Market Medicare Advisors. Welcome in, everyone. Danny, what are the fundamentals of retirement?
Let me kind of approach this, if I can, from talking about something that was just recently happened in our world, and that's the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl trophy is named after the Lombardi, or is named the Lombardi Trophy after Vince Lombardi, the famous coach of the Green Bay Packers. And he was kind of a no-nonsense kind of football coach. He was very intense, if you will, and he was famous for his approach to the game of football. Tough-minded. He brought a simpler approach with mastering the basics of football, and those basics were blocking and tackling. A lot of times, whether we're talking about sports or we're talking about other areas of our life, today we're talking about retirement, but we need to get back to the basics. And so we want to talk today about some of the basics.
And Danny, all areas of retirement have different basics. Let's start with the financial fundamentals. What are some of the fundamentals on the financial side?
Well, let's start with talking about how people underestimate expenses. And so when you're walking in from having a paycheck from an employer and you've been working your entire adult life for 30 or 40 years, you're used to getting a routine paycheck, whether that's weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, however you get paid. And so when a paycheck comes into the household, you disperse the money into the different budgetary accounts in the household. And by the time maybe the monies are running a little thin in the household, you start to say, well, it's time for another paycheck to come in. When we sit down and talk with people about expenses, a lot of times people say, well, I have a good idea of how much expenses are. I do. But we want to try to put them through a little bit of a quiz and say, all right, but you want to know before you retire how much your expenses are. You don't want to underestimate those. And then you want to make sure that you're accounting for things as they come up before they come up. So that would be number one, is underestimating expenses. Then number two is failing to account for inflation. A lot of times you'll hear on TV and the internet and different ways of media that will talk about, do you know how much money you need for retirement? And the answer is, well, it depends on a lot of different factors. And one of those factors that we're going to talk about right now is talking about inflation. You know, for years pre-COVID, inflation was running between 2 to 3% for, 20, 30 years, something like that. But then COVID came around, and then we had what was known as hyperinflation. Hyperinflation at a time during COVID, at one point, inflation was running at better than 9%. The effects that inflation can have on someone's portfolio can be devastating. I mean, devastating. The difference between inflation running between 2 and 3%, and let's say that they were able to get it under control and not the 9% that it was spiked to almost at one point, but let's say that it was only running at a simple 5% inflation. That doesn't sound too terribly bad. 3% inflation before COVID, 5% inflation after COVID, that's not too bad. But over the course of time, that can be devastating to a portfolio. And so you want to make sure that you account for inflation, because how much ever money you've saved for retirement, you want to make sure that it's going to keep up with the inflation environment that you're in. You know, as retirees, you're walking into retirement, and we don't know necessarily what kind of retirement economy we are retiring into. We don't know if we're going to have a bad cycle of retirement economics, if you will. For example, if you go back to a period of time in our history, with stock market history, for example, that from October of 1929, when the stock market crashed, until November of 1954, that's 25 years of time. That's more than a generation of stock market where there was no growth in the markets. And you may say, okay, Danny, that's an anomaly. That's kind of a one-off. All right, so let's move forward in time to 1966. From 1966 to 1980, that's 14 years of time, where over that 14-year period of time, there was only 1 to 2% growth in the stock market or from the stock market over those 14 years. I'm not talking 1% to 2% per year over those 14 years. I'm talking 1% to 2% over those 14 years. And again, you may say, yeah, okay, but tell me something more recent than that. Well, if you're retiring today, or if you were in the course of close to retirement, you probably remember the years from 2000 to 2013. And from 2000 to 2013, that's known as the lost generation, where from 2000 to 2001, 2002, the stock market crashed by half because of what was called the tech bubble. But then the market came back in 2007, and then in 2007, 8, and 9, again, because of what's known as the mortgage crisis, and you had some Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, you had all that stuff going on in the news cycle. The market, again, was down by more than half. It took until 2013 to recover, and that's not accounting for inflation. So if you account for inflation from 2000 to 2013, actually you need to get to 2016 or 2017 just to have what you had in the year 2000. So if you don't account for inflation, then that's going to be something that's going to rear its head, and you want to make sure that you have some way of keeping up with inflation going forward. The last thing we want to talk about in this segment is talking about lifestyle. Lifestyle, so if you think about it, you've been doing a certain thing prior to retirement. You've been doing a certain thing a certain way for, again, 30 or 40 years. You get up in a certain time of day, you take a shower, you get your lunch for lunch, you leave home maybe at a certain time, you drive a certain pattern to work. You get to work and you interact with your work coworkers. You do whatever it is your task is are at work. You get home and you do the social events at home, and you do that same kind of routine over and over and over the course of 20, 30, 40 years. You're used to doing that. We as humans, most of us don't like change. And when it comes to retirement, there is a huge lifestyle change. You want to make sure that when you retire, you have something else that's going to drive you, because you just don't want to retire and then go home and watch paint dry. That may be fun for a little bit, but sooner or later, you're going to need to have a reason to get up out of bed. What's driving you to go on? You need to have a cause. Someone said to me one time, they said, Danny, I don't want to retire so much as I want to rewire my thinking. So you have a lifestyle change when it comes to retirement, and you want to find out, okay, yeah, did I save enough? Do I have enough? Those are great things that we need to cover. But then what's going to drive you in your retirement years? Is it just all about golf? I had a guy one time tell me that he wants to golf all the courses of the world. And so I met with him one time, and then we parted company, and about 6 months later we crossed paths again, and I said, how's it going in retirement? He said, well, I played golf in South Africa, I played golf in Scotland, I played golf in California, I played all the nice courses around the world, golf for 6 months straight. Danny, there's only so much golf you can play in life. You have to do something in life. So lifestyle change is something that we need to make sure that we cover.
And another fundamental is this: when your financial advisor isn't working with your tax advisor, who isn't working with your healthcare advisor, things can get they can get messy, and they can get missed, and they can even create more surprise expenses. But at Market Advisory Group, we're all working together. To see if this team could be the right fit for you, all it takes is a 15-minute introductory phone call. And to set up your 15-minute phone call, call us at 833-MAG-REPORT. That's 833-624-7376. Or check out our website at ionretirement.com. There you can also watch past episodes or submit a question for us to possibly answer in a future episode. In the next segment of Ion Retirement, we continue with retirement fundamentals with estate planning. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hi, and welcome back into Ion Retirement. In the last segment, we talked about the financial fundamentals of retirement planning. Fundamentally speaking, Danny, what would be next?
So let's talk about the failure to understand healthcare and the role that it plays in retirement. I've talked to a lot of people in my career where they've come up to me and they may be under 65, and they may say, between their late 50s, early 60s, they say, I could retire right now if I had access to healthcare, but I don't have access to healthcare if I leave my employer until I'm 65 for Medicare. Mark, tell me a little bit about that, as far as what do you see from a healthcare expert on the importance of healthcare in people's retirement plans?
Well, you're exactly correct. That is a consideration for a lot of people, and it's becoming more and more consideration. There's a statistic that we utilize in our workshops that we do all over the area that it said that in before we retire in our normal daily life, about 8% of our annual income goes towards healthcare and healthcare needs. But in retirement, obviously, as our health changes as well, that number can be 14 to even 15% or more of our actual household income. So at a time when our income technically usually is going down, our healthcare expenses are actually going up. And that creates a lot of confusion. It creates a lot of concern for a lot of people on exactly how are they going to be able to afford healthcare going forward when they know they're going to have access to more of it as time goes on.
So do you see that people come to you primarily at 65 and over and looking for health care? Or what do you talk to people about when they're under 65? Are they just having to work at their employer until 65, or do they have the other choices?
We definitely run the gambit. Not only do we help people assess whether or not taking that COBRA offer when they leave their employer might be an option for them or for their spouse. Perhaps we'll look at the ACA or the open marketplace to see what options might be there for them. There's short-term options with short-term plans depending on how long that gap is before they turn 65. So there's a lot of different options for them that might be available. It really takes a sit down and have a conversation about how we might be able to best address those.
So, Danny, healthcare naturally leads to estate planning. What fundamentals do people miss there?
Sure. When it comes to failing to understand estate planning while you're alive, I think, Alex, as an attorney, you could say that estate plans are not just for the deceased, but estate plannings also come into play way before someone would have a passing to the next generation.
Yeah, that's right, Danny. I think a lot of people think during their lifetime they don't really need anything in place, that if they just get it done right before they die, then that's good. But what they don't take into consideration is if you are incapacitated and can't make decisions for yourself, if you don't have healthcare and financial agents named for you, then your people are going to need to go and get a guardianship or a conservatorship. And that's a really big time burden and financial burden. It can cost $2,000 and up to 2 months for them to be able to get that planning in place.
Usually you hear people say, well, I'll jump off that bridge when I get there. And when you find that if that comes to estate planning and you wait until you need that document, like I wish I would have had that power of attorney last week, well, then as you say, you have to get a guardianship and not a power of attorney. And that's going through the courts. And now you're at the subject to the will of the courts, the time of the courts, the expense of the courts, and so on.
Yeah, exactly. And especially when you have maybe a contentious family, if you haven't planned ahead and named someone in your documents, then you can have a situation where multiple members of your family are fighting over who gets the ability to make decisions for you. So that process is going to take even longer and it's going to cost even more money. It's not what we call ideal.
So then we're talking about before you pass, but then estate planning does obviously come into play when you're wanting to pass those assets to the next generation, and what kind of distribution. Do I need a will? Do I need a trust? Do I have heirs that might be someone who might want to spend money on the next shiny object that comes in the door? Or do I have heirs that would be more frugal with it? So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we have all sorts of different solutions that fit every type of family situation that you may be in. From someone who's all alone, doesn't have any close family, isn't married, doesn't have children, to someone that has children and grandchildren, blended family situations. All of those types of things are covered, and it's important to plan and do what you want to do, because otherwise the state has a plan that they're going to do for everyone that doesn't have anything in place, and that's almost certainly not going to fit what you want.
Gotcha.
That state plan is called probate, is it not?
Well, it's part of the probate process. It's called intestacy, and that just means that you died without a plan in place.
I don't know if it's just been the luck of the draw or what has been going on with new clients that I'm meeting with for the first time, but it seems like I've had a run lately of clients that are very urgently wanting to address their own estate planning needs based on what had just happened with the passing of their own parents and how disorganized it was and how it did not flow smoothly.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, it doesn't hit home until they've had that negative experience themselves, where a loved one has passed, whether it's a parent or their own child or a sibling, nothing was in place. It took a lot of time and effort and energy to go through it. And especially not knowing what to do when you've lost a loved one is a very disorienting and very traumatic place to be. And that's what we want to avoid, is make sure that people have something in place so that when life happens and it happens in a way you're not expecting, you've got a plan and everyone's on board with the plan so that when they need to come see us, they say, hey, I know there's a plan in place. I'm grieving right now. I don't remember what it is, but I know there's something there. Walk me through it. And then they're good to go.
You know, none of these elements of an effective retirement plan have to be a surprise if you have a team that's working together to prepare you for the road ahead. Do you have that team? And if not, Market Advisory Group is here to help. All it takes is a 15-minute introductory phone call to learn if Market Advisory Group is the right team for you. Go ahead and set up that 15-minute phone visit right now. Just dial 833-MAG-REPORT. That's 833-624-7376. Or visit our website at ionretirement.com to schedule. There you can also check out past episodes where we focus on different client stories where retirement didn't go quite as planned. Stay tuned. In the next segment of Ion Retirement, we come back to do some tax talk fundamentals, and we'll do that right after this. Hi, and welcome back into Ion Retirement. In this episode, we've been talking about retirement fundamentals. And Danny, I believe you've got one more fundamental that you wanted to touch on for us to close out the show. What would that be?
Yeah, so we talk all the time here as a firm about talking about taxes and tax planning. You know, we always have to do tax preparation to stay in good graces with Uncle Sam. But Joshua, so you're in the heat of tax season right now. But talk about a little bit about tax planning and the importance that can play.
Yeah, intentional tax planning so changes the way that retirement's going to work. The key is you've got to start it early. You can't wait till you're, like late 70s trying to do something, because there's going to be mandates on you. Those required distributions will have kicked in. The time to recoup the tax costs just isn't going to be there anymore. It's when you're embarking on that retirement journey, like at 65, where you can start making intentional changes in your nest egg to get to a place where it's going to outlast you, right? And so you've got to get these pieces put together, but it is tough to understand how those all work on your own. Nobody retires trying to take on a part-time job of understanding all this. So that's great when we can sit down together and start mapping out not just what the client has, but then how we can make those intentional tax changes to get to wherever they're wanting to go.
Do you find people have saved in their adult life for retirement? Mm-hmm. Do you find that they've saved through traditional means and find out when they get to retirement, they say, shoot, I may have been doing this all wrong?
Yeah, a lot of times when we meet people, they've been saving really hard through workplace plans. And so that's great. It's convenient. They always do it. They don't have to think to do it. It just happens through payroll. But for most of them, it's all done through pre-tax channels. It's a traditional 401k, traditional IRA. And so the taxes have never been addressed. So you really have two options. Do you just address taxes over the rest of your life? Or do you proactively decide to deal with the taxes on your terms? Doing that can be messy if you don't get into it knowing the fundamentals of how all these pieces work. But if you do it appropriately, it can set you up for much more success over the long term.
But I was told in my career when I early started that if I saved through my payroll check, if I saved through on a pre-tax basis, that I would be in a lower tax bracket when I retired.
Yeah, that's a common misconception that was sold to people, whether it's because tax rules have changed, whether that's because they saved really hard generating a large nest egg so that when they do retire and those mandates do kick in, it kicks out a lot more income than they had anticipated. And then that generates a large tax consequence. And that's where the tax planning comes in, unwinding some of that so that when those mandates do kick in, they're more digestible.
So do you find that there's an age group of people that you run into, that we run into, that have a sweet spot for planning when they've saved through pre-tax or or traditional means?
Yeah, so the youngest to really do that effectively be 59 and a half. Because then as we make these changes, we can deal with the tax consequences in the course of those changes and not trigger early distribution penalties. Once you hit 63, we've got to start worrying about Medicare impact, sorry. Not that that's a showstopper, but it's just something else we have to worry about. Once you get to the part where those required distributions kick in, that tends to kind of wind up a lot of those changes.
Now, wait a minute. You said 63 for Medicare. I thought 65 was for Medicare.
It sure is 65. However, when they do that, they look back 2 years. So your premiums when you turn 65 are based on the income you generated when you were 63.
Where would someone go to learn all these little nuances of the tax code?
Well, they either can spend all day, every day for months scouring the internet, digesting all these.
I gave you a softball, buddy.
Or meet a great team of professionals who are here waiting to help them out.
There you go. So
did I hear you say that the sweet spot potentially is 59 and a half to 63?
That is the sweetest spot, yes.
And then also, it's very important for people to understand that when it comes to making these tax moves, as far as tax planning, timing is everything. It's not it's a new year. Let's do this January 15th, and let's convert a bunch of traditional dollars to Roth dollars. That could end up being a wiki stick-it, couldn't it?
Yeah, we'd really like to do that later in the year. So this way we can understand your year better. We can understand the tax year better so that you're making the most informed decisions possible.
Do you know the tax code by heart? Maybe you do. But do you also know the Medicare system and estate law? There's too much in retirement for any one person to understand on their own, and you don't have to. If you'd like to set up a 15-minute introductory phone call with Market Advisory Group just to see if we're the right fit for you, reach out right now at 833-MAG-REPORT. That's 833-624-7376. Or do so at our website, ionretirement.com. There you can also find Ion Retirement episodes on YouTube, another place to find us, where we upload all past episodes for you to watch on demand. That's all the time we have for this episode. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Rick Everett, along with the entire panel, reminding you that we're here to keep an eye on retirement.
Unless otherwise indicated, all client and prospect names mentioned on this show have been changed to protect the identities of the individuals discussed. Investment advisory services are offered through Foundations Investment Advisors LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. The content provided is intended for informational and educational purposes only. The views, statements, and opinions expressed herein are those of the individual speakers and not necessarily those of Foundations and its affiliates. The information contained herein does not constitute an offer to sell any securities or represent an express or implied opinion or endorsement of any specific investment opportunity, offering, or issuer. Any discussion of performance or returns are not indicative of future results. Each individual investor situation is different, and any ideas provided may not be appropriate for your particular circumstances. Foundations only transacts business in the states where it is registered or excluded or exempt from registration requirements. Registration as an investment advisor is not an endorsement of the firm by security regulators and does not mean the advisor has achieved a specific level of skill or ability. No legal or tax advice is provided. Always consult with a tax professional. Legal services are offered by Eidelman Law Firm. Tax services offered by Market Tax Services. Market Advisory Group does not provide legal or tax advice. Any comments regarding safe and secure investments and guaranteed income streams refer only to fixed insurance products. They do not in any way refer to investment advisory products. Rates and guarantees provided by insurance products and annuities are subject to the financial strength of the issuing insurance company, not guaranteed by any bank or the FDIC. The guest commentators featured in this show are not investment advisor representatives of Foundations and do not provide advisory services. Market Advisory Group does have several investment advisor representatives that can provide such services. This is not endorsed or affiliated with any U.S. government agency, the Social Security Administration, or associated with any federal Medicare program. We do not offer every plan available in your area. Any information we provide is limited to those plans we do offer in your area. Please contact Medicare.gov or 1-800-MEDICARE to get information on all of your options. A Roth conversion may not be suitable for your situation. The primary goal in converting retirement assets into a Roth IRA is to reduce the future tax liability on the distributions you take in retirement or on the distributions of your beneficiaries. The information provided is to help you determine whether or not a Roth IRA conversion may be appropriate for your particular circumstances. Please review your retirement savings, tax, and legacy planning strategies with your legal/tax advisor to be sure a Roth IRA conversion fits into your planning strategies. All rights reserved.